How's it going this week, everybody? This week I'm going to be having Francisco on the show, and he came on to share his encounter with a paranormal entity of some kind when he was in middle school. A very clear, intense encounter, and I'm glad he came on to share that story today. It's very interesting. Also, just want to do a quick shout out for all the members that have been signing up. I do appreciate it. If you guys are interested in the membership, you can head over to challengetheunknown.com and become a member. It'll give you early access to episodes 2 weeks before they come out. And one last thing before we get started tonight, everybody, is this episode is sponsored by Smoky Mountain Squatch Coffee Company. Nathan sent me over the Cowboy Blend to try, and honestly, I love it. I'm a big coffee drinker. That's no secret to all of you. And just for my audience, there's a 10% off discount code if you use CTU at checkout. There's a link in the description if you would like to order some. Thanks for listening. We're rolling, so why don't you tell me what you saw, man?
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to start off with just a bit of background information before I get into it. So when I was in the sixth grade, around 12 weeks of school, my family and I, we moved in with my aunt, which was my mom's sister at the time, or still is actually. But we were only going to move in because my parents were going to invest in starting their own business, and it takes money to do that sort of thing. So it led to spending as little as possible and saving more. But eventually things didn't work out between them, and it just led to a divorce. So my mom got her own place, and my dad was still renting a room with my aunt. And so I had been living with my aunt until I graduated from middle school, and I was just about to enter high school until both my dad and my aunt moved out. And so we went our own way. Now, this encounter occurred sometime around 2014, 2015. I was around 13 or 14. Just giving an estimate of the time. I'm not exactly sure what the year was, but it was sometime around middle school. And so it was a weekend morning. My aunt and her family, they were on their way to church. And so I decided to stay home and not go with them because, as a little kid, I found church boring, and it just wasn't my thing. No offense.
Right.
But later, it was around 6, 7 a.m., and my aunt told me to be back later that afternoon or evening. And so as soon as they left, I put on Netflix, and I was just relaxing, It was a weekend, didn't have school, had nothing to worry about. And I was watching Malcolm in the Middle. And my cousin had a dog, and the dog was sleeping next to me on the couch. And eventually, a few episodes throughout the show, the dog decided to go into my cousin's room and sleep on his bed. And as a habit, what we would do with our family was leave the doors open just to know, who was home and who wasn't. And so we kept it that way. And so a few hours go by as I'm watching the show, just relaxing, laughing, going on my phone, texting friends as well. And that's when suddenly my door just slammed shut. It was very loud. And I assumed it was just the air coming in from the room because I had a window in my room. But the thing was, I had closed the window before I went out to the living room that morning. And so I ignored it. And I was doubting myself. I was like, oh, well, maybe I did leave it open, right? But shortly after that happened, my cousin's dog started barking. It was really quick. It was just like a few seconds. And that's when a white lady-like figure appeared behind the wall from the hall to our rooms. And so I was still watching the TV at this point, and it was visible from the corner of my eyes. And I ignored it completely because, I was just like, oh, I'm probably just hallucinating or something, right? And so its head was becoming more visible as it was peeking. I'm guessing it just got annoyed that I was ignoring it. And I was able to tell that its skin was super white. It was, as I mentioned, whiter than paint, or white as paint, but it had very large black eyes, and the hair was long and wet. And I turned to look at it, and it just it hit itself again. And I go back to watching the show. I'm ignoring it. I'm just like, oh, this is not happening. But it happened again right away, once more. It peaks again, and this time, its hands were grasping the wall, and it showed its face up to the nose, and the hands were really white. The fingers were long, and it was very clear. And at that point, I did look back towards it. It was just like a split second that I made eye contact with it, but eventually just hit again. And as soon as I saw that, I immediately opened the front door and I called my mom, panicking, telling her what happened, and she was just confused. And she told me, "Oh, well, it's because you behave poorly and you don't do your homework and you don't listen to me and stuff like that." She was just giving me a lecture, trying to scare me as well. But she did offer to pick me up, but eventually I told her I wanted to stay. And it was only because my cousin had an Xbox and he had Netflix, and I didn't have those things with my mom, so that was the only reason I stayed. But
that is that is the most hardcore teenage thing I've ever heard of. I just witnessed a black-eyed supernatural entity appear and look at me in the eyes, but I'm going to stay in the house because this motherfucker has an Xbox. That is fucking awesome. I'm sorry. Please continue your story.
Yeah. And so I kept the front door open, and having the front door open, people would walk by, and I would see them and listen to them. So it made me feel safe. And so my aunt arrived later that evening. It was around 6 p.m. And I was afraid to tell them, actually, because I was like, you know what, they're just going to laugh in my face and ignore me, and it's not going to go well. But instead, she was very focused on what I was saying, and she was asking me about the whole situation and what did it look like and what did it do, and she mentioned that she had seen it as well. And so she explained to me that she's heard footsteps, and she's also seen the figure before in the kitchen when she was sleeping in the living room. And for her, it would actually happen like around 2 to 3 a.m. consistently. And once she told me that story about her seeing the figure as well, then I felt safe. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not a crazy madman. I wasn't just seeing things. Other people seen things too. So it was a very great thing to hear from her instead of her rejecting me and just making fun of me. But eventually, when we moved out of the apartment, when I graduated from middle school, my cousin ended up finding out that a lady had died there. It was an old lady. And the only way he found out was because he was friends with the previous people who were renting that apartment. And they also moved out because of that reason. We didn't move out because of that reason. We just moved out because we wanted to, but they actually ended up moving out because it came to a point where it got really severe and doors would shut and open and footsteps and noises and stuff. But it was pretty odd how we never came across any information throughout our time there, but it was only up until the end when we found out what happened.
Man, dude, that's a wild encounter, man. I hear a lot of the paranormal stuff. I think majority of my show has actually wound up being the paranormal, even though personally I like focusing on a lot of the cryptids. I really try and get those episodes on. I love like the Dog Man and Skinwalkers. I love doing all those, but there's just more paranormal stuff that I wind up being able to actually access because there's so many people that encounter these things. But your story in particular is, full on intense experience. Sometimes I get I saw a mist, I saw something out of the corner of my eye once, and but that's crazy, man, to see the full body formed of a person, and the black eyes is really creepy too. I've heard about that before, which makes me, kind of want to transition to the next question here. What do you think that these things are, man? Do you think that they're people? Do you think that they exist in different light spectrums? What do you think they are?
So when I was a little kid, I was forced to go to church and stuff, and we were always told it was just demons, and so that's what I had in my mind as a little kid. Oh, it's just a demon, But now that I'm older and I've done some research, I've come across the spirits and demons and these type of figures that other people also see, but I do still believe it was at least some sort of demon, because just by seeing it, it was horrific. And I've heard stories about people seeing ghosts, and that's not quite anything that I saw. And so it just has me to believe it had to be some sort of evil entity or something.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because the black eye thing is definitely kind of a red flag. That's really weird that it would have those specific features, and
that's right.
And why was its hair wet is another question, which is weird. Like it sounds creepy, and then the way that it was kind of peeking at you, like around the corner kind of thing, that's really
right.
horrifying. And that would mess me up.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead, man.
Yeah. So I was going to mention that. So the hallway to the rooms, it was at least like 6.5 feet tall, right?
Right.
And this thing was pretty tall. Like, if you were to, I'd say, like, if I were to stand next to it, let's say, it would definitely be taller than I am, and I'm around 5'11". So to see that and very thin creature from like its arm and its hands, then it's just crazy to think that it exists. That there's stuff like that out there, and I'm pretty sure other people have seen it too. But to just think about it, even talking about this right now, it's just giving me goosebumps, man. It's insane.
Yeah, man, I've seen stuff too, man. Like, I've talked about it on my show 1,000 times, but I've had a door slam in my face before, and all kinds of weird stuff happen. Yeah, it's I've seen some intense stuff, and I've heard things too, like clearly audible stuff, and it's weird, man.
Right.
I wonder, and for the information that you said you had on the person that died there, a little old lady is what you had.
That's right.
Right. So how would a little old lady be taller than an adult male?
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
sounds like mimicry to me, which is very scary stuff to get into. I've talked about mimics on my show, and they're freaky, man. They're really freaky.
Yeah.
I don't know what they are or what their purpose is, but they're creepy, man. And when I first heard your story at the beginning, I was thinking, poltergeist, because I heard about the family breakup and that kind of stuff, because you hear a lot about poltergeists around that kind of stuff. But this sounds like something else, man. It definitely is creepy, definitely. Man. So I don't know, man. I guess I kind of just want to ask you, what have you seen it again, or is that like just your only experiences with it were while you were in that house or apartment?
Yeah, so ever since that encounter, that was the only thing I've encountered since then. That was the last thing that's ever happened to me. There was another time, if I may go on to the story.
Yeah, go ahead.
This was when I was a lot younger. I was in 4th, 5th grade. And so at the time, it was only me, my dad, and my mom. My brother and my sister weren't born yet. But so at that time, as a little kid, I would sleep with my parents in the room, because as a little kid, I was scared of sleeping outside in the room alone. And so in this case, what would happen was that my parents would leave the TV on, again, to feel some sort of security for me, not to get scared. I would always need like a light source that had like those lights you would put on the wall, and it would just, shine. And so they left the TV on that night, and I fell asleep, and I ended up waking up pretty early in the morning. It was probably like around 1 or 2. And the only reason I knew what the time was because my dad had given me like his Nokia phone that he had, and I was able to use that as a flashlight. And so when I woke up, the TV was on static, and that TV would never do that. It was a pretty old TV, but it would never do that unless you went to the wrong channel. And so I told myself, I was like, oh, probably my parents clicked the wrong button and, changed the channel, and that's why it's static. But I turned off the TV, and once I turned it off, I literally saw this thing move on top of the wall, like on the ceiling. And it just moved to the corner.
Fuck that.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh man, what? And I turned on my Nokia, I put on the flashlight, I pointed at it, and there was nothing.
Huh.
And I was like, oh man. I was like, that's weird. And so I left my phone on. I left it on facing that corner of the wall throughout the night. And I went back to sleep. And the way I remember immediately, I don't know if it was a dream or something, but a little white kid grabbed me from my chest, pulled my shirt. I was like in a sitting position on my bed, and I was like a few inches away from his face. He was just like staring at me down. He didn't say a word or anything, and the eyes again, they were black, but it was white as well. It was really white, and it was just bright. He had short hair, and he was on me like strangling me, and I was fighting, and I remember moving around and stuff, and I ended up kicking him, or I think I punched him or kicked him. I don't remember what it was, but I ended up pushing him away, and that's when I woke up, and I got up again, and I was like, what? I was like, is this a dream, or what's going on? And so I had the phone. I still had it on. I turned the TV back on, and I went to a channel. It was like a kids channel. It would play 24/7. And so then I went back to sleep. I woke up that morning. It was throughout the week, so I had school, and I remember I had some sort of marks on my chest. It was like red. And so I never told my mom about that. Literally until like a few months ago, I just mentioned that to her, and she had mentioned that she saw the same things in that apartment. But I always thought it was like a dream, and I might have just been holding my shirt down. But it was pretty painful. I had some chest pain for like, I think it was 2 to 3 days that I had it, and then it just went away. But again, I was afraid to mention it to her because I didn't like going to the doctors. I didn't like doing any of that sort of stuff. And then getting called out on it from her, then it's just like, oh no, I'd rather just not say anything.
Right. You don't want to escalate it, even though it did happen, you don't want it to, you'd rather just let it sit.
Exactly.
I get that, man.
That's right.
I've heard that story, or that I've heard that a lot from people. People are just like, you know what? It's not worth the trouble. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to talk about it. And like some people write into the show, man, which is really cool. They'll say, hey, I listened to this episode and I've never talked about this story from like 1970 or 1980. And here's what happened to me back then.
Right.
Thanks for having the platform. And it's so weird, man. Like a lot of this stuff, just, you kind of like put things in a box, in the real world, but then you experience something like this and it just doesn't fit in a box, so people never talk about it.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of that, like, stigma around like a lot of these topics, because people think, oh, you saw a ghost, you're crazy, or you saw Bigfoot, right, you must be some redneck whack job, so
exactly.
Which isn't true, man. A lot of normal people see this stuff, but they just don't talk about it.
That's right.
But yeah, man, I'm glad you came on to share these stories, man. They're really creepy, and I wish I had an answer for you, but who knows what this thing was. And good thing you haven't seen it in a while, because
yeah,
that would be definitely something hard to deal with on a long-term basis. So thanks again for coming on, man. Yeah. And we'll wrap things up here.